Siren song of socialism sweeping the Democrat Party after last night's primaries in New York. Meanwhile, a play being made to derail the Republicans from within, and another big crackdown on taxpayer theft in the medical community. It's Wednesday, June 24th, and this is news and commentary from America's Heartland. You're watching Heartlander News. Well, welcome into Heartlander News. Be sure to keep up to date with all the latest headlines all day long and all week long at heartlandernews.com. I'm Chris Stigall. You might have seen last night big victories in New York City for the socialists, sweeping the New York primary elections. Let's go to a little of the audio right off the top here to kick things off. Brad Todd over at CNN. They're positively giddy about this, as a matter of fact. Take a listen, number 37.
I mean, the Democratic Party now is the Democratic Socialist Party of America. They're for anti-Semitism. They're for confiscation. They're against capitalism.
Come on, we're for anti-Semitism. That's obscene. That's an obscene statement.
And you know, you also can look tonight and see somebody else is a big loser. That's Hakeem Jeffries. Hakeem Jeffries is going to lose these races in New York, where Zoran Mamdani
He didn't endorse in these races.
He did endorse. He endorsed Goldman. He endorsed his incumbent members of Congress. If he can't get the Hispanic caucus chairman across the line in a city where he's the leading figure of the political machine, then his stick is very short in the U.S. Capitol. And that's because Hakeem Jeffries himself, as liberal as he is not far left enough for today's Democratic primary vote.
Yeah. Brad Todd there saying the quiet part out loud for the Democrats. Van Jones, by the way, committed Democrat, confirms as much in number 36.
Well, first of all, New York City matters because the two most exciting left-wing candidates are here, AOC and Mamdani, but also this is the stronghold for the establishment, Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. This is a battle between the establishment and this insurgency, and the roof is collapsing on the Democratic Party establishment tonight. If Mamdani gets a hat trick, 3 out of 3, this is a new era for the Democratic Party, and you can't write off New York City because this is the place where both, it's a power center for the establishment and the insurgency, and they're going head to head tonight. And right now, this is no longer a movement. This is a movement and a machine at the same time. There's just no way to sugarcoat this. If Mamdani pulls off a hat trick, is a new era in Democratic Party politics.
Well, and if you're a moderate Democrat who's on the election, who's on the ballot this November, Van, I mean, they're all going to get asked about the positions that we're hearing from these other fellow Democrats. Well,
look, I think, you know, from our frontline Democrats will be able to make their case for themselves. I think they'll be able to do okay. We got a lot of national security Democrats in other parts of the country, but this is a big deal tonight. And I think that, look, I don't know what you want me to say here. This is a straight up battle between the establishment and the insurgency, and the establishment is getting its butt kicked tonight in New York City.
Yeah, and by the establishment, he means any veiled attempt to mask what is straight up full-blown socialism, which, of course, that clip came before it was final, that Zoran Mamdani's gamble in a series of House primary last night, the contests, paid off. All 3 of Zoran Mamdani's endorsed candidates won. All of them Democrat socialists, every one. Hakeem Jeffries, as you heard in the previous clip, Chuck Schumer, they endorsed against Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York. So even though we know that these Democrats are by no means moderate, Zoran Mamdani has just embraced he's put his loving arms right around socialism, run on it, and is winning. If you need more proof, let's go to number 38 here, Aaron, if we could please. The vaudevillian at CNN has run the numbers on this. The Democrats aren't hiding it, nor are their voters shying away from it. They love socialism. They're all in.
Well, among Democrats themselves, the Democratic Socialists of America have a higher net favor rating than the Democratic Party does, at least those who are members of Congress. I mean, just take a look here. Dem Socialists of America, plus 17 points. Democrats in Congress, plus 4 points. No wonder that Dem Socialists are getting nominated across the political map in different primaries, because simply put, they are more popular than the Democrats currently in charge.
Okay, I'm just thinking back to when I was sitting here and Zoran Mamdani was sitting there when he was running, and I asked him about capitalism.
Yes.
And he had no problem saying that he had real issues with it. Okay, he wasn't afraid to say it. By the way, he ended up winning. It didn't hurt him. How do Democrats today view socialism compared to capitalism?
There's a reason why it didn't hurt him, and that is simply because this is one of the biggest political changes I've seen during my lifetime. Match up socialism, capitalism among Democrats. You go back 16 years ago, 2010, capitalism and socialism right there, favorable rating, 51%, 50%. Look at it now. Socialism clearly in the lead among Democrats. 66% of them view socialism favorably, just 42% view capitalism favorably. No wonder Mamdani had no problem blasting it.
Which is fascinating because when you look at races coming up in New York, you've got a big one up in the Bronx. And you've got Zoran Mamdani endorsing a Democratic Socialist, Hakeem Jeffries not going with the more traditional incumbent. So there are two big races involving Democratic Socialists coming up in New York that Mamdani's endorsed. Tell us something we don't know.
I'll tell you something you don't know, and that is that the Democratic Socialists are likely to win one of those races, the one down in Brooklyn, going to beat the Brooklyn borough president. You take a look there, look at that, an 81% chance to win in Brooklyn. And in northern Manhattan, at this point, a 52% to knock off an incumbent, Espaillat. Unbelievable.
Yes, Espaillat, long time incumbent with all of the incumbents endorsing him. All right, thank you, Harry.
Yeah, and that prognostication turned out to be true by Harry Hinton, to his credit. That was before the election results we just played. What does this tell us? Well, it tells us what's coming. David Friedberg, excuse me. Doggone it. Sorry. I'll come out of that clip again. Yeah, and Harry Hinton turned out to be completely right. In fact, that wound up being far more right than he even knew. It was a sweep for the socialists. So what does that tell us about the Democrat Party? Well, David Friedberg, a guy who hosts a show, he made some comments anyway, on a podcast called All In. He said something profound, and I actually wanted to quote it directly. These are not my words. They are the words of David Friedberg, but I think they're important. He said, the great lie is that society is divided between rich and poor. That's what Democrat socialists sell. That's what they're winning on right now. The great truth, says Friedberg, is it's makers versus takers. The makers build, create, and deliver real value, like houses, software, art, businesses, everything that moves civilization forward. Takers, on the other hand, they watch. They criticize, they analyze, they politic, Zoran Mamdani and this bunch that won last night, for instance. They push the lie that the rich hoard money unfairly. So the poor, of course, have to seize it. All the while, they position themselves to rule over the chaos. You see, takers, says Friedberg, thrive on division. Makers drive progress. It's time to choose your side. The Politburo, you ever heard that term? It means leaders who elect themselves to dictate the flow of the economy, the allocation of capital, what work individuals are allowed to do, what activities they're allowed to do in a unfree society. That's what the likes of Zoran Mamdani and Democrat socialists are creating, a Politburo. They are truly the oligarchs. That's Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Mamdani, Ro Khanna, and the like. This is the group trying to coalesce power and create for themselves a system whereby they have greater influence, greater control over aspects of the economy. They want to seize the means of production. They want to control education. They want to control media. Anytime there's an effort by an individual enterprise or an individual themselves to go out and actually build a business and succeed or do something that's outside of their scope and their span of control, they lose their minds. So they're basically trying to contort things, says Friedberg, about inequality and fairness and justice, when the truth is that they're simply their own rising empire. They're the evil empire in Star Wars. They're the folks who want to take from all of us what we were endowed with when this nation was started, and what many people came to this country for, which is individual freedom and liberty and the ability to build a business in peace, the ability to make decisions, to do what you want with your own assets, and to have functionally private property. And the likes of this group are taking it all away, piece by piece and step by step. They're forming a Politburo where they can effectively control the economy, control education, control the media, and tell us all what we can and can't do and say. very frustrating to watch, Friedberg points out, because it's all masqueraded as virtue, as justice, as equity. You hear that word all the time. Of course, it's a bunch of nonsense words that they use to try to make themselves seem virtuous when at the end of the day, they're fundamentally just bad people. The people who talk the loudest about inequality and fairness and protecting the working class, they're the same people building the most sophisticated machinery of economic control this country's ever seen. And they're disguising it, again, as virtue. That is the great American Politburo. It's being built by the Democrats, the Democrat socialists, the hard left. You know, now that's David Friedberg from the All In podcast. And it's really, really smart commentary. And you can apply it to what's going on in Los Angeles. Now, they may not as overtly call it that, but out on the left coast, there's another big fire in the news. But fires aren't the emergency. Fire really is just a test of competence. Los Angeles was built in the desert, surrounded by hills that have burned for centuries. It's not new. Nobody gets to act surprised that there are fires in Southern California. The primary job of government in a place like that is pretty simple. Make sure fires don't get out of hand. Well, lately, we know Los Angeles keeps failing the test. The Palisades burned, thousands of homes, the life savings and family futures of working people reduced to ash. It's a year later now, and the neighborhoods are still empty, and rebuilding moves at the speed of bureaucracy while insurance companies tuck tail and run out of the state. And you've probably seen the news now that this massive cold storage warehouse in Boyle Heights has been burning for days. 85 million pounds of food destroyed. Toxic smoke choking neighborhoods, working families, breathing it all in. Another emergency declaration. Another fire, the same pattern. And after a while, you stop seeing isolated tragedies. You see that destruction is actually a policy. Do you hear me? Hello, New York. It's coming for you. It's already been on display in Southern California. Destruction is a policy. Months before the Palisades fire, people like Karen Bass signed a budget that cut the Los Angeles Fire Department by more than $17 million. A critical reservoir in the Palisades sat empty, offline when the flames hit. Years of ideological priorities collided with reality, and then the same system that left us unprepared made recovery agonizingly slow. And this, the reason I share this with you, you say, what does this have to do with the New York elections, Stigall? I say this. This is what socialism looks like in practice in the United States of America. You want a preview of what's coming for New York? Look at Southern California and Los Angeles. Not tanks on Wilshire Boulevard, not gulags, just slow, relentless destruction of what people build, followed by endless process that protects the people in charge. Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, came of age admiring systems that put politics, activism, and ideology ahead of markets, private property, and competence. She later walked some of it back, fine, but ideas have consequences. Communism and its softer cousins have always been destroyers, destroyers of incentives, destroyers of responsibility, destroyers of the things people own and love. In Los Angeles, the fires are doing just what the ideology does: consume value faster than it can be rebuilt. The makers build the homes, stock the warehouses, pay the taxes, create the wealth. The system undermines them at every turn with rules, budget cuts, lawsuits, excuses, and then acts shocked when the destruction comes. Nobody gets fired. Nobody resigns. The same people stay in control, recycling the same explanations while regular families lose everything. That's not incompetence anymore. That is a feature. Private property isn't a luxury, folks. It's the foundation of stability and family and dignity. And when government becomes better at regulating it, explaining its loss, managing its decline than protecting it, you don't have governance anymore. What you have is managed destruction. That's what's coming for New York. That's what's come for Los Angeles. Fires happen, sure. But in a city that has known this danger for generations, the response today reveals the truth. Do we repair? Do we rebuild? Or do we bury people under paperwork, ideology, and narratives while the smoke keeps billowing? Right now, Los Angeles is living proof. When ideology outranks competence and accountability, becomes something that we just treat as optional, well, the destroyers win every time. And that's the latest. You need any more proof that the Democrats have come completely off the reservation? Taylor Sheridan agrees. He's the guy that created Yellowstone. He's deeply concerned not only at what I've just laid out, but the fact that the Democrat Party has basically just decided they hate Donald Trump, ergo, they don't have to abide by the laws at all. Give me number 26.
And it's so dangerous what we're seeing. You can like Trump or not like Trump. It doesn't. People are going to like presidents and dislike presidents, but now defying the rule of law because he happens to be the head of the federal government and openly defying the federal government, the repercussions of that are going to be, okay, fine, you can't stand this man, you think he's a terrible president, and you're not going to follow his laws, but that's the new normal now. So when a president gets in that you do support, then the other side, because we've established this precedent, they're just not going to follow his laws either.
Right.
And now we've eroded the rule of law. And and then what happens?
Yeah, he's not wrong. Eroding the rule of law indeed. Meanwhile, the mayor of Chicago, another lunatic. Give me number 31. Today's Democrat Party, it's all coming to a head. I tell you what, it's on full display. I'm glad ahead of the midterms.
To turn to another important part of this work. 2 years ago, I signed an executive order establishing a task force to shine a light on the harm that slavery and racist policies have caused and continue to cause, particularly the harm that they've caused to Black Chicagoans, while more importantly, identifying pathways towards repair, opportunity, and investment.
What? The state of Chicago, run exclusively by Democrats, and the mayor there, Brandon Johnson, signing an executive order to shine a light on the harm slavery continues to cause Black Chicagoans. You're a Black Chicagoan. You run Chicago. What are you talking about? Meanwhile, Joy Reid reminds all of us that Black Americans, from sea to shining sea, not one of you Black Americans is remotely proud or excited about the 250th anniversary of the country because, you guessed it, slavery.
Because in many ways, and with apologies to my dear spicy white friends, because I know that my white brothers and sisters do love a 4th of July. It is Independence Day. Everybody's barbecuing. It's a thing. I can promise you, Black folks, we will take that day off. We will barbecue because we off. But Black people, that nobody Black I know is really excited about the 4th of July because it is what Frederick Douglass said it is. It is the celebration of slaveholders who freed themselves from having to pay taxes to the crown for their slave empire. And that is what it is. I mean,
and yet it's interesting that people like Joy Reid would willingly hand their vote over to the very Politburo that I just described off Mr. Friedberg's words about the Politburo right off the top of the show. Isn't it funny? They look back at our founders freeing us from the rule of a tyrant, from a king, from an all-powerful monarch. They lament that because of the past sin of slavery. They say nothing about us today is virtuous because of the past sin of slavery. And yet today they will do exactly what our founders were fighting against. They will coalesce around an all-powerful form of government that dictates our every move and all the terms of our existence. Isn't that the height of irony 250 years later? And this is really, folks, what this celebration, this milestone celebration is this year. That's what it's about. And as we look ahead and when people say, well, we have it for another 250 years, a republic if you can keep it, it's hard to say with people like Zoran Mamdani and Joy Reid and Brandon Johnson. It's hard to say. We're going to fight like hell. I still believe over half the country does not believe the way forward is Zoran Mamdani and Joy Reid and Brandon Johnson. I still believe that's true. I mean, look at the movement of people in this country. They're fleeing places like New York and California, and they're moving to places like Tennessee and Texas. Oh, speaking of Texas and crazy Democrats, now might be a good time to go to the Right Reverend James Tallarico. This is a guy who claims to be Christian, claims to be of the cloth, a man of the cloth, running for Senate down there against Ken Paxton. And some new unearthed footage from him talking about his view of Christianity as a pastor, I mind you, in number 27 here.
Yeah, and that's, I always think of myself as a Christian who hates Christianity,
Yep.
right? And like I always get drawn back into it.
I always think of myself as a Christian who hates Christianity and then gets drawn back into it. Okay. Meanwhile, a guy who likes to pretend he's a more moderate Democrat, a self-hating Jew, Josh Shapiro, a tiny, tiny little fella who fits right in your pocket. He's the governor of Pennsylvania. He's Jewish and likes to pull that out when it suits him, but when he's talking to the masses, he tries to pretend he's not. Anyway, Josh says he's very happy to be a Democrat because why is this? This will make you snort. By the way, if you're drinking coffee right now or anything, you're consuming anything right now, just heads up. This will be a spit take clip for you. So put down whatever you're consuming and listen to this one.
Democrats are the party of real freedom that allows women to make decisions over their own bodies, allows parents like me and my wife, Lori, to make decisions over what vaccines our kids are going to be able to get, that they can read the books that they want to read, not have certain one banned by certain politicians. The point I'm making here is that we can be a pro-freedom party and a pro-growth party, a pro-safety party, a pro-education party. That is what we're doing in Pennsylvania. We're winning in Pennsylvania, in the toughest state in the country to win in. And that is what I think we need to see more of, not just in our party, but all across America.
Isn't that rich? A pro-freedom country allows parents like me and my wife, Lori, to make decisions over what vaccines our kids are going to be able to get. Now, you and I both know we're not that far removed from a time when Democrats were literally going to force not just your kids, all of us, to take every shot they tell you to take or else. So again, what he's saying is he wants the freedom to be in charge to tell you what you will do. There's no freedom. There's no choosing. There's no choice. In Governor Shapiro and Democrats' view, the freedom rests with them, the Politburo. They coalesce the power. They tell you what you'll do and what you won't do, what you will and won't pay, what you will and won't inject in your system. Makers versus takers. Bottom line, that's where we are in 2026. Are you a maker? Are you a taker? And the Democrat Party is a party of takers, victims and takers, and using their victimhood, their fake victimhood and virtue signaling to take and destroy the makers. It's that simple. While we're at it, you want some dumb actor's point of view? Why not? How about a hardcore, really, really, really rich left-winger named John C. Reilly? Funny guy. I like him as an actor. Give me number 33. Here's his view of the right, the conservatives, because he's an enlightened left-winger.
If you stand up for human rights, why is that a right or a left thing? Why aren't people on the right wing concerned about human rights? They're human too. This whole thing that kind of has come into vogue of empathy trap. It's an empathy trap. That's what Elon Musk says. Empathy is don't be fooled by the empathy trap.
Yes.
Stick to your agenda and what's best for you.
Holy fuck.
Don't start feeling bad for so and so. They're on their own thing. Look out for number one. Wait a minute. Empathy is not a trap. Empathy is a superpower.
That's right.
That's what makes human beings exceptional. Our ability to look outside of ourselves. We're not an alligator trying to just get the next fish. We're human beings. We can relate to something that's not us. That's a superpower. And it's also the cornerstone of civilization. The fact that we stay at the red light and don't just zoom out because we want to get through the light faster, because what will happen? Well, we might smash into someone. Well, you don't know that person. Yeah, but I still don't want to smash into them. Those are the building blocks of civilization. That's the agreement
And
that we treat. I mean, it's very Catholic to do unto others. You know, treat your brother as you would treat yourself. You know, like.
And to your point about the right
it's
wing,
crazy that we have to argue for these things right now.
It's
the world, that's a
insane.
really upside down world feeling to me.
I don't even know where to start with that. But you see, this is the trick. This is the game. Now, here's the first thing I would ask John C. Reilly, where he's sitting in front of me in that little environment. How much of your personal wealth do you give to charity, Mr. Reilly? Just out of curiosity. What do you donate? How wealthy are you? How much wealth should you have, sir? How much wealth is too much wealth? I'm sure you've made a fortune. Could we look at your books? Could you open your checking account? I'd just like to know your assets. Because the guy who runs New York and all of the candidates who just swept New York last night, they all think you're entirely too wealthy. And you believe that empathy means that we've got to, that's our superhuman ability, to see where others are hurting and, give. And while that's true, I mean, as Christians, we're called to care for our fellow man. And of course we do. And it's always true. Every time the studies are done, it's the poorest in the country, the most conservative. It's the red states that are always the most generous. Always. It's not even close. It's runaway true that in the South, Mississippi, some of the most impoverished states of the Union are always the most generous by percentage of what they actually earn. Who's always the least generous? The most fabulously wealthy. And it's always the fabulously wealthy who look out across the country in disgust. They look down their nose and they say, the rest of this nation is not virtuous enough. Ergo, the Politburo. Let's consolidate the power to make sure everybody is being properly empathetic. And of course, the people say, well, wait, you're very rich. What about you? Shut up, you. I'm already virtuous. You see, I had the idea to make sure that all of you are being virtuous. So you can't question the sanctity of my virtuousness. I'm the one that came up with the idea of making sure you're all doing the right thing. That makes me the most virtuous. I'm the boss of virtue, you see. That's where their power lies. It's always that lie that they're supremely good, you're supremely bad. Their hearts are in the right place. Give us the power because we know what's good for everyone. They never tell you exactly what they're doing to make anyone's lives better, but they know what you ought to be doing. And they also know that anybody out there that has too much, they're going to make sure that anybody that's succeeding out there or doing too well, they're going to force empathy by making sure things are taken from or destroyed from the people that actually create things, create jobs, create wealth, create the opportunity for private property, home ownership, and the like. We'll handle it. We'll control the means of distribution. We'll control the means of your vaccination schedule. We'll control it all. We'll control your medicine. We'll control and decide what kind of medicine you get and when, who gets to stand in line for what medicine when. You get a surgery, you don't need that surgery. Your arm's broken, okay, it can wait because his heart valve needs replaced or vice versa, whatever. You see, because they're the Politburo. Back to Joy Reid. We're not really excited about the 250th anniversary of the country because really it's a celebration of guys who had slaves. Interesting analogy, slavery. How about compassion? It's interesting. The Daily Wire says why this compassion debate is taking a dark turn. Medical assistance is dying. Medical assistance in dying represents a civilizational shift from medicine ordered toward healing to medicine ordered toward end of life. Proponents frame it as compassion. Do you hear this? But it rests on a distorted understanding of dignity and suffering. It is often presented as a narrow, carefully regulated response to extreme cases, typically involving terminal illness and unbelievable pain. Framed this way, it appears an act of mercy, a last resort in circumstances where medicine can no longer cure and suffering seems to have no meaningful end. That framing is difficult to sustain. Over the past decade, the debate has shifted from whether assisted death should be permitted at all to just how broadly it should be applied. The question is no longer simply about end-of-life care, but about the definition of suffering and who gets to decide when it becomes intolerable. Well, of course, the left does. John C. Reilly does. You just heard him say he's the king of empathy. right? We on the right, we're not empathetic enough. John C. Reilly is very empathetic. Why, I bet if he read this story, he'd say, what kind of monster are you to look at someone dying and not allow them to end their life, not help them end that suffering and let their lives flicker out? What kind of monster are you? That's not very empathetic. You see? Don't you see how this works? Don't you? The empathy trap. He says, I've never heard of this empathy trap. It's ridiculous. No, this is it. This is exactly what this means. People who celebrate abortions of Down syndrome children. People who decide who's suffering and really ought to just be extinguished because that's the compassionate thing to do. You see? Whether it's the means of the means of production, how much somebody earns, where they live, the taxes they pay, whether they get to own a home or whether they have to live in an apartment, whether they get to drive a car or they have to take the subway and mass transit. You see, the compassionate thing, the empathetic thing, the Politburo, the central planners, the very, very wealthy consolidate the power. We'll make sure we take from the makers and distribute it to all of you evenly. This is the trick. This is the siren song. And I'm sorry to say, go back to Harry Enton off the top of the show. It's winning in places like New York. That's what this midterm's about, ladies and gentlemen. That's what the future of the country's about. If Republicans should lose control of Congress in these last 2 years of Donald Trump, they will certainly stymie the Trump agenda. And if you were to give Democrats the keys to the kingdom entirely, buckle up, because they believe they're the kings and queens of virtue. They're the kings and queens of empathy. They know what human rights are. They're all about fairness and compassion. Of course, unless it's life, keeping people alive, that's not compassionate. The compassionate thing to do is extinguish babies in the womb and extinguish life if there's illness or suffering involved. Extinguishing life is compassion. Do you hear me? This is what the American left believes. They, the Politburo, the authoritarians, the central planners, they are the most empathetic. Empathy equals ending life. That's the perversion of it. Empathy equals that guy's too rich. He needs to be brought down a peg. Empathy is building bureaucracy, and when your home is burned down in a wildfire, slowing down, if not halting entirely, the ability to rebuild. Empathy is policies that chase insurance companies out of your state so that you can't afford the rebuild. And they don't want to do business with you anymore. That's empathy. They're going to punish insurance or whatever. They're going to punish people. And the more these empathetic Politburo central planner left-wingers get, the more empathetic they get on your behalf, the more power they amass, and the weaker you and I become. Isn't that ironic? The crown wearers of empathy for you and me actually end up making life demonstrably more miserable for everybody. But they're doing fine. Because you see, they're in charge of empathy. They get to dole it out. Not very empathetic toward those of faith, are they? Major League Baseball, this from NBC News, stands by their warning to players over Pride Night. Major League Baseball denied they targeted players who opposed gay rights and put some of the blame on the San Francisco Giants for an embarrassing flap at their most recent Pride Night game. Josh Hawley of Missouri posted a letter in which Manfred, the commissioner of baseball, defended Major League Baseball against allegations it was forcing players to celebrate LGBTQ plus community. The Giants held their annual Pride Night June 12th at Oracle Park, with most players wearing caps that had the team's iconic interlocking SF logo in rainbow colors. 3 Giants that night scrawled a Bible verse, Genesis 9:12 through 16, on their caps. Some opponents of gay rights have used Genesis 9:12 through 16 as their rallying call. Used it. Well, no, they're just quoting scripture, the word of God. I would think the empathetic rulers over us all, the John C. Reillys of the world, the Zoran Mamdanis, since they are the height of empathy and understanding, I would think they would know the people of the Christian faith adhere to the word of God. And Genesis 9:12 through 16 is not simply a propagandist tool, it is the word of God. I would think the kings and queens of empathy would know that. Major League Baseball's policy must be uniformly enforced regardless of the message in order for it to survive legal challenge, which means prohibiting both the positive messages and the negative messages, Manfred wrote in his letter to Hawley. By warning the Giants players that they may not include Bible verses on their caps in the future, Major League Baseball was not discriminating or chastising those players based on their religious beliefs. Rather, Major League Baseball was enforcing a long-standing collectively bargained rule that keeps uniforms clean and avoids controversy. Right. In posting the letter from Manfred, Hawley claimed victory over Major League Baseball, saying Manfred admitted fault in the office's handling of the Giants' Pride Night. Commissioner writes to me and admits that they were wrong to threaten the Giants players over Bible verses, promises never to fine or discipline these players or any players for their religious beliefs, Hawley said in a statement yesterday. But in the letter from Major League Baseball to Hawley, Manfred never uses the word wrong or admits that Major League Baseball issued threats or fines or discipline. Well, it's very, very clear that in the abundance of, again, compassion and empathy, Pride Night, you see, they're so empathetic, they're so proud of the diversity of this country, they will punish anyone who doesn't want to participate. How inclusive. Isn't that nice? Don't you love that we have our overlords of diversity and inclusion and empathy to tell us when we're not behaving appropriately? You do. I know you understand. I'm laying it on thick. I know this audience is smart enough to understand the point, but for heaven's sakes, think of the irony of it. Our leaders in empathy will chastise any of us who aren't behaving appropriately, who might disagree or have a different point of view. The height of empathy, indeed. Meanwhile, the Senate has approved, this is very, very frustrating, given that we have a Senate run right now by Republicans, albeit a narrow majority. It is run by John Thune and the Republicans, and President Trump's had about all he can stand of John Thune foot-dragging on the SAVE Act. He has said we're going to get this thing done, and he encourages Thune to do so. The Senate approved a House-passed war powers resolution on Tuesday. It was a 50-48 vote, the 10th time Democrats have forced on the matter since Mr. Trump went to war to end Iran's nuclear program. Now, that's fascinating. It succeeded because of the absence of two Republican senators who would have voted against the war powers measure. So that's intriguing. Of course, Mitch McConnell is out. Who was the other one who was gone? Dave McCormick missed the vote traveling with the president to Pennsylvania. So Senator McCormick, I'm certain, of course, would have been there had he not been traveling with the big guy. But this is the point. The Democrats lied in wait. They waited until McConnell's out. He's ill. He shouldn't even be there. He's infirm. So you can count McConnell out for the remainder of this term, as far as I'm concerned. Dave McCormick leaves. So Schumer now sees he's been around a long time. So he sees the opportunity to force a slap of the president. They're not even in charge, and he did it. This is the 10th time they've done it. And yet John Thune, for whatever reason, John Thune can't. He can't figure out. He keeps saying, I can't get the SAVE Act passed through the Senate. Can't do it. President Trump has been very, very frustrated with this. Give me number 43. He made mention of the SAVE Act yesterday, and Thune.
And we will pass the Save America Act to protect our sacred American election. And in the Save America Act, it's very simple. All voters must show a photo, voter ID. Very nice. May we see a picture, please? All voters must provide proof of citizenship. And there will be no mail-in ballots except for illness, disability, military deployment, or travel. And we will also, in that same bill, enshrine in permanent law no men in women's sports and no transgender surgery for our children. So together with the help of patriots throughout Pennsylvania and all across the land.
So it's no-brainers. It's 80-20 issues. President Trump is correct to hit the stump, wrap it all into one, make the pitch. The Wall Street Journal, though, of course, they're in Thune's corner. The establishment class at the Wall Street Journal, they don't like Trump is on a collision course with Senate Republicans, you see. All of that very common sense stuff that every American agrees with. Every American agrees with the SAVE Act, but he's on a collision course with the Republicans. Now, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Rand Paul, as well as Cassidy, crossed party lines to pass a non-binding resolution to rein in Trump's war powers. But a few of them can't see their way to getting the SAVE Act passed. Trump's frayed relations with the Republican-led Senate will be on display Wednesday when he visits to press GOP lawmakers on the Save America Act, which the president sees as essential. Well, no, we all see it as essential. Wall Street Journal. The country sees it as essential. Again, 80-20 issue. It's been polled and polled and polled. Everybody wants voter identification. Everybody wants to make sure only legal people are voting. Everybody wants it. It's not even a debate. But they're making it sound like it's something fringe that Donald Trump is unreasonable about. And, of course, John Thune and the organized Republicans in the Senate, well, they're being very reasonable. Trump telling reporters yesterday that the discussion would focus on the Save America Act. The lack of progress in the Senate, writes the Wall Street Journal, has led to calls from Trump to eliminate the filibuster or fire the current parliamentarian for blocking attempts to lift the 60-vote requirement for the Save America Act. Senator Mike Lee has pushed for months to spend more floor time on the Save America Act. If you follow him on X, Mike Lee has been, by the way, outstanding here. Tensions boiled over in last week's closed-door Senate lunch in which John Cornyn, who just got his butt kicked by Ken Paxton in Texas, and John Kennedy of Louisiana, confronting Mike Lee, according to people familiar with the meeting. Lee, undaunted, continues to pressure John Thune and other Republicans on social media. Thune said he appreciates that Lee feels strongly about the issue, but at the end of the day, I have to deal with reality, he said, and sometimes the alternative universe that is X doesn't reflect the facts on the ground. So here again, John Thune, loser, can't do it, won't do it, sad trombone, Debbie Downer, wah, wah. Chuck Schumer, Dave McCormick flies to Pennsylvania with Trump for the day. The infirm turtle is out at the hospital or doing whatever the hell he's doing. And Chuck Schumer sees an opportunity to slap the president around, forces the issue, and gets it done. The guy who's not running the Senate. So you tell me, Thune, what's the deal here? Why is the minority leader able to navigate the halls of power and get his way 10 times, just procedurally watching things, and you just keep sad tromboning it and you run the show? Why is that exactly, John? What's the deal? There are ways, there are means. You just don't want to do them. You just call it some wacky theory on X. But I'm the statesman. I'm the Senate Majority Leader. I know the rules, and so okay. Senate Republicans are staring down a difficult midterm election cycle. Well, you can damn sure bet they will be. Wall Street Journal. You think it was bad for Cornyn? And others who have been shellacked in these primaries? It'll keep getting worse. Senate Republicans are going to be punished for this. The Senate Republicans can either give the Republican electorate a reason to get excited or not. Underscoring these strained dynamics, the president was invited to lunch not by Thune and GOP leadership, but by Rick Scott, a longtime Trump ally. Scott said he was talking to Trump about the Save America Act on the phone Friday when he invited him to the lunch. Scott runs the lunch as chair of the Republican Steering Committee. Scott, who lost to Thune for the majority leader job in 2024, said he wasn't trying to stir up trouble. He said, I just bring people to lunch and create conversation. I think there's a greater chance something good will happen. Well, of course, there should be a conversation. I agree with Senator Scott. Why shouldn't the president have the opportunity to talk to the Senate about this issue? Here's Tim Scott. While we're talking senators, little Tim Scott here talking about the Biden administration. How did we get in the mess we are financially? We don't want to go back to it. As we're talking about midterms and we're talking about the Democrats possibly taking control, why do we find ourselves in an economic mess? Tim Scott reminds us in number 34 here. Take a listen.
Too many in Washington still believe the answer to every problem is more government. We saw this during the Biden administration. Reckless spending and heavy-handed regulation made life more expensive and made it harder for businesses to invest, lenders to serve their communities, and builders to build. We should be clear, regulations, they have a cost. When Washington makes it harder for a bank to lend, a business to invest, a builder to build, and an entrepreneur to grow, those costs do not disappear. They show up in higher prices, fewer choices, and fewer opportunities for American families. Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's the Politburo. That's what Tim Scott doesn't want to go back to. That's what Rick Scott of Florida doesn't want to go back to. That's what Mike Lee does not want to go back to. But the guy that runs the Republican Party in the Senate, John Thune, says, well, there's really nothing we can do. Well, I mean, the Republican National Committee has had to sue Nebraska over an election law that allows certain individuals who have never resided in the state to vote in their elections. The lawsuit challenges a 16-year-old state law in Nebraska that allows an individual to vote in the state if they are a U.S. citizen and have a parent registered to vote in Nebraska. In some cases, someone who has never resided in the United States nor registered to vote in the United States could vote in Nebraska, according to the RNC. I think that's true. That can't happen. And under the SAVE Act, it wouldn't happen. But Thune says, sorry, we can't pass it. We don't have the votes. That's not the reality on the ground. And don't you have the feeling that if Chuck Schumer were running the show, he'd figure it out? I think so. I think he's just demonstrated it. Meanwhile, there are a couple chirping on the sidelines out there. Marjorie Taylor Greene, not that anybody's asking what she's up to, but she has quit. She left. She left the House. She decided she didn't want to be in the fight anymore, and that's fine. That's her prerogative. Marjorie Taylor Greene announcing that she's ditching the Republican Party. And she's doing that on the heels of Tucker, because Tucker Carlson is apparently now the pulse of the conservative movement or something. Axios is very excited about this. The former Trump loyalist is now part of a growing group of conservatives who believe the president's foreign policy has gone astray. Foreign policy? What are we even talking about? What do you mean his foreign policy's gone astray? I know what they mean. Israel. They want to keep talking about Israel. It's delusional. President Trump has struck a peace deal with Iran. Iran says they're going to comply. We're going to continue to watch it. What's Israel got to do with anything? It doesn't. They just keep drumming it up. It's really strange. The fomenting of the constant conversation over here on the right. You know, you got the left to deal with. That's one thing. But then you've got this, what I'd call subversive right, who I don't believe are right at all. I think they're Islamic sympathizers for whatever reason, whether that's monetary or ideology or both. I don't know. But I do think the conservative or Republican, whatever you want to call Marjorie Taylor Greene and guys like Tucker, Candace Owens and the like, they've been infiltrated by their own influencers. Who they are, I don't know for sure, but let's not pretend that it's organic. You know better. None of these people are doing any of this for free. Nobody does anything for free. And everybody has motivations of some sort. These people didn't just wake up pure as the wind-driven snow. They're anti-Israel. That's fine. They're entitled to be anti-Israel, but be forthcoming with it. You're not going to be a Republican anymore. You're going to give quarter to the Democrats because you don't like that President Trump went to war with Iran? Huh? That doesn't make any sense. And why now? Again, subversion. Here in the midst of a socialist sweep in New York, and people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson are talking about abandoning the Republican Party. Weird timing, isn't it? And a couple of Republicans in the Senate voting against President Trump. Isn't it strange? Doesn't it tell you a lot about the state of the Republican Party? You know, the Republicans have a lot of work to do. There's no doubt about it. I'm a registered Republican. I vote Republican because what alternative have you? Am I saying the Republicans are pure and clean as the wind-driven snow and don't need reform? Of course not. Is there an alternative? Not the Democrats. Certainly not the Democrats. One bit of positive news with rare bipartisan support. The House passed a housing bill last night that aims to address the shortage of affordable houses. The bill, called the Road to Housing Act, shows that the housing crisis is something both parties actually agree needs to be addressed. The bill passed pretty overwhelmingly. It aims to relax local regulations and encourage building. It now heads to President Trump, who's expected to sign it. The package, which cleared the Senate, is being hailed as historic. The bill is the most significant home construction legislation since 1990. There are nearly 50 different measures in the bill, which basically combine various housing proposals from both sides of the aisle. One, called the Build Now Act, offers localities that build more housing a bigger slice of existing federal funding. One provision, likely to have impact quickly, makes it easier and cheaper to build manufactured housing. It also contains a watered-down version of a measure initially meant to ban private equity firms from owning and buying single-family homes. The bill doesn't address the two biggest issues plaguing the real estate market right now, high mortgage rates and the steep rise in home prices over the past 5 years. Well, that's the market. That's demand. That's cured when there's more supply. And as far as the interest rates, well, hello, Federal Reserve. President Trump has long addressed that and discussed that. That's not something that the White House or Congress can actually impact, the interest rate. Turning to the justice stack, there are a couple of bits of good news here. The leader of the Texas ICE Center attack gets a 100-year prison sentence. Those of you calling for accountability, here's some of it, and that's the good news. 8 people, each sentenced 30 to 100 years in prison yesterday in connection with violence at a Texas federal immigration facility. The incident back on July 4th of last year. Prosecutors said Antifa militants wearing black tactical gear opened fire on law enforcement officials. The sentences handed down today make it clear Antifa terrorists who attack law enforcement and federal facilities will face swift and uncompromising justice. Good. And then there's this to wrap up the day, and I'm thrilled about this too. The Justice Department yesterday unveiling charges against around 450 defendants for healthcare fraud totaling $6.5 billion as part of the Trump administration's stepped-up anti-fraud efforts. The announcement includes charges against 90 medical professionals and targets a range of alleged healthcare fraud schemes, such as wound care and opioid distribution. It also includes what officials said is a record number of Medicaid fraud defendants, 300 people accused of submitting over $500 million in false Medicaid claims. And get ready for this now. Federal officials said the operation spanned 57 federal court districts, 41 states and territories, involving 46 Medicaid fraud control units in what they described as the largest coordinated anti-fraud effort to date. Seized more than $127 million in cash, luxury vehicles, jewelry, and other assets. So those of you that want a little bit of accountability, you got it, at least in that today. And there's much more to come. $6.5 billion, that's just a drop in the ocean. That's just scratching the surface. 41 states and territories. You know there's more. So that's the good news. This fraud and this theft and this waste, it's back to the beginning of the show today. It's overseen by the likes of Karen Bass and Zoran Mamdani and socialists. They're the takers. They're the Politburo. They oversee, they take, they thieve. They decide what gets distributed. And they're the makers. They're people that have actually achieved things, that go in and they audit and they see where the money's being spent and how it's being stolen or wasted. The left hates that. The left hates transparency. Because you see, if they're in charge, as John C. Reilly said, they get to decide what's empathy. It's kind, you see. Is it being spent appropriately? Well, you don't need to ask questions. We're in charge. We know what's empathetic. We know what's kind. It's a great trick. And the Democrats have deployed it very successfully in places like Los Angeles and New York. But it could sweep the nation if the midterms don't turn out correctly. So we soldier on, and we will tackle that on another episode. Meanwhile, that's going to do it for us today here at heartlandernews.com. If you have not been to the website yet, I do hope you go. heartlandernews.com, because each day and all week long, they have great stories written by journalists right here from America's heartland, typically called flyover country by people on the coasts. These are great journalists who are clear-eyed and don't come at any of the news with any kind of whacked out propaganda. It's just a straightforward approach to news. It's heartlandernews.com. I do hope you'll check it out. Subscribe to Heartlander News here on YouTube if you'd like. Give us a like, maybe a comment if you're so inclined, and we'll do it again next time. Thanks for watching here on Heartlander News.